I took the lanyard from Maya even though I had my own. The ledger-issued one was sturdy, the kind you can pull a car with if you loop it twice and pray to physics. The one she tossed me was limp and plasticky with a peel-on sticker for ID that said "Visitor" in a font that looked apologetic about existing. The clip squeaked like a small animal protesting a bath. I slid it into my bag. I was collecting small permissions for a thing I didn't want to call revenge out loud. Revenge is a word that prances. Gravity, on the other hand, just sits there and works while no one notices it. I didn't tell Maya about the HOA levers because journalists like to pretend rules are external, like weather. It makes for better copy when a hurricane ruins a picnic than when a guy in Unit 4B flips a toggle and a truck shows up. Also, I didn't need her to tell me not to be stupid. The shift that night was like every night at the ledger. Brittle fluorescent light, machines breathing, screens yawning their blue. The press room in the basement thunked and roared on schedule, a tidal machine swallowing paper and exhaling it at 45,000 copies an hour. When a paper is alive at night, it feels like you've snuck into a zoo after closing. The animals look at you and pretend you're not there because they have important private routines they only do in the dark. I sat with my eggshell mug and opened the building control dashboard on a screen the size of a pizza box. I had been in and out of this system for years, adding access, revoking it, resetting the badge of a columnist who liked to lose his wallet on Fridays. It wasn't my code, but I knew where it ticked. In another tab, I had the Condo Association portal open. Clean interface, a soft green header that tried to sound neighborly with its font. It was all so polite. I toggled guest parking to strict again, just in case it had relaxed itself out of pity. It hadn't. I reviewed the escalation rules. The management company paid a vendor named Harbor Secure to do enforcement on demand. I checked the backend logs, public to owners if you know where to look, and saw 3 tow requests fulfilled in the last 2 months. One canceled after a man cried loudly in the lobby to the concierge, and the concierge called his supervisor, who called the vendor, who called the tow truck halfway down the block, and told him to bring the SUV back, as if that negated anything. The system recorded the cancellation with the timestamp and a weary little note. Client reversed. I drank my coffee and let it go cold because decisions prefer to be bathed in something bitter. Then I walked down to check the front door cameras at the ledger for kicks. Part ritual, part professional reflex. The camera catches rats like it catches people, low and in a hurry, their eyes little moons when the light hits. I scrolled through faces of messengers, the courier with the crooked cap who hums show tunes, the pair of theater kids who like to kiss in our vestibule because our vestibule has better light than anywhere their rent affords. Patterns are their own kind of weather. At past, the printing press choked, cleared its throat, and settled. I took that as a good omen. Machines talk if you listen long enough. They ask you not to touch the wrong wire. At 3, I did my rounds with a key that's older than me. It's scarred in that handsome way metal gets when it earns its right to feel heavy. I went by the Metro pit, a cluster of desks and empty energy drink cans, and left a spare battery on Maya's keyboard because the last time her recorder died in a hallway outside a hospital, she said words that made a janitor drop a mop. I liked preventive penance. It makes the night lighter. By 4, the emails I'd filed with the HOA had pinged back with tickets. Kakro through 273, Dr. 1 through 274, Dr. 1 through 275. Confirmation numbers like train stops in a schedule only I read. The board doesn't wake up until 9, but the management software doesn't sleep, and the tow company listens to code more than to people, which is why I prefer code. When I finally left at 7, the sky over the river looked like a strip of film someone had exposed with a match, thin orange and then gray. In the parking lot, a delivery truck reversed with that alarm beep that has become the metronome of cities. My ankle muttered at me in an old language. Lena was already gone when I got there. The house smelled like toasted bagel and perfume trying to be a grapefruit. On the kitchen table, she'd left a napkin with a half-moon of coral and the word Friday circled in hearts. Not to me. To herself. To the story she told herself about success. I picked it up and looked at it the way you look at a snow globe, from a position of safety because your hands are on the outside. I dropped it into the trash and then picked it back out because evidence is not always useful, but it always has a temperature, and I wanted to know if the ink had dried. The city in daylight is a softer liar. It tells you have time. It was Thursday, a day for checking wires. I stopped by the condo office under the pretext of asking for another mailbox key because I enjoyed the ritual of complaint. The management office smelled like coffee gone sour and scented candle, which is how you know someone is trying. The property manager, a man named Trevor with a jaw that hadn't decided if it wanted to be kind or Stonehenge, greeted me with the tone of a pastor in a church that used to be a movie theater. "Mr. Hart, how's the night shift?" "We prefer the other morning," I said. "Mailbox key, and I had a question about guest parking enforcement." He looked over my shoulder like the question was a soccer ball he could kick away. "Everything's by the book. We had to pull back last month. We made some folks upset. You know how it is." "I do," I said. "We also have rules for a reason, right?" He smiled with his top teeth. "We do, but we also have discretion." "Discretion is when the rules take a nap," I said. "I like that," he said. "Can I use it if we ever make a brochure?" "Only if I get a byline," I said. He slid a key across the counter with the flourish of a magician who only knows one trick. "I'll make sure the guards know strict mode is active this weekend. You know we get busy with the waterfront events. They like to use our garage because it's cheaper." "Events," I said, as if the word had arrived in the building by itself on wheels. "Success celebration," he said, without sense of irony. "They sent the invite to the wrong list at first. Half our residents got it and thought they were donors." "And did they donate?" "Only to the HOA with complaints," he said, and laughed. "We'll keep an eye." "You have cameras on the visitor level?" "Sure do." "If you ever need software work, I'll call you," he said, which is what people say when they don't plan to. I didn't care. I wasn't selling him anything. I was lowering the temperature in the area around my plans so that when heat came, it wouldn't look like it came from me. On my way out, I saw the bulletin board in the lobby with its usual strata of life. Piano lessons offered by a woman named Yasmin, a dog walker whose business card had a pug in sunglasses, the flyer for Thursday's Community Yoga, Pay What You Can, with a photo that Lena had taken, smiling faces on a pier that looked like they were auditioning for a toothpaste cult. Underneath, someone had added in pen, "Pay what you can't." I took a photo and erased the pen with a square of tape because I didn't want that to be the narrative that lived visible when the board met next. I wanted my narrative. Best to leave the surfaces of these little theaters clean. I walked to the corner bodega and bought a roll of painter's tape because painter's tape is an answer to more questions than paint would suggest. The owner, a man who'd watched 3 generations of family work behind the counter without once changing the height of the candy display, nodded at me as if I'd passed a test I didn't remember taking. "Paper," he said, pointing at the ledger on the rack. "You know the ending," I said. "I like the smells," he said, which was honest in a way most compliments aren't. Newsprint smells like the inside of a saxophone. Back home, the door camera app had a software update that promised improved motion detection in low light and AI-based package recognition. I downloaded it because ignoring updates is a good way to show a would-be intruder which window you like to leave unlocked. The changelog read like a poem about fear. False positives, false negatives, improved person detection when wearing hats. Machines don't know what a person is except statistically. I reconfigured the focus zone so it saw more of the street and less of our doormat. I adjusted sensitivity to single malt. I named the device Front Eye in all caps, because sometimes naming a thing the way you feel about it is a way to make it behave. I ate a sandwich that tasted like sleep and rewatched the waterfront garage footage I'd collected from a public vantage, because Maya was right. If you're not on private property and you're not obstructing, you are not a problem. The mirror selfie I'd taken, a trick of angles, not vanity, looked like an album cover for a band that wasn't good. The timestamp glowed orange. The teal SUV's plate was visible enough to give the plate reader a fighting chance if a camera later cared to be asked. I wasn't going to need it, not yet. What I needed was a sequence: arrival, location, pattern. Teal is a color you can measure. By the time Lena came home, the day had turned the color of morning after a thunderstorm, exhausted, but proud. She put a bag on the couch that said, "Studio" in clean white letters. Branding is the art of forgetting what our hands looked like without the logos. "Big day?" "Huge," she said. "We got the donor to match for the scholarship classes in the low-income zip codes. Derek said my deck was a master class in narrative." She made a voice for Derek when she said it that made him sound like he sold sunscreen and also time. "And to think all those narratives come with parking," I said. She set her jaw in a practiced angle. "Can we not? I'm tired. We have the success celebration tomorrow, and I need to go through the run of show and make sure the audio isn't going to fry when the marina's Wi-Fi hiccups." "I thought success celebrated itself," I said, "because I'm less mature than I pretend." "Grow up," she said, which is what she says when she wants me to stop being accurate. "Run of show," I said, as if tasting it. "Who's the host? Derek?" She gave me a look like I'd sat in the wrong seat at a wedding. "He's the face. I built the show. There's a difference." "I know," I said, and, because truth can be generous, I added, "You're good at it. Making people feel like they're in a boat together while really they're in different boats yelling the same chant." She tilted her head, curious that I'd offer sugar. "You could learn something from that." "I prefer the kind of boat where you can see the leaks," I said. She sighed in a way that tried to delete the conversation. Her phone chirped. She looked at the screen and turned it over so the face was down, a small reflex in the wrist, little as the flinch of a rabbit when it hears a twig without the corresponding footstep. "Friday," she said, not to me. "Big." "Friday," I agreed, to the room. That night, I dreamed that I was in the elevator with a swarm of bees, and each one was a notification. Their bodies were translucent. You could see the little messages inside them scrolling past. They landed on my hands and face, and I woke up with my heart slamming like a fire door. Morning had that heartless quality it gets when it arrives for everyone at once. It was Friday. I made coffee and then made it again, because the first one tasted like metal, and the second tasted like regret. The news played in the background. A councilman had said something ridiculous on tape. A crane had bent like grass. A dog had rescued a smaller dog that had fallen into a storm drain. The world at a distance, curated for common grief. I put on jeans that made me look like I had a job where things fell on your toes, and the plastic lanyard that made me look like I was pretending to have jurisdiction. I printed a sheet that said, "Sound Level Survey" on the office copier, and then printed it again, because the toner had developed a streak that looked like a river across the word survey, which felt appropriate but not helpful. In the car, I paced my breath the way boxers do in movies. They all get it wrong, but the idea calms me anyway. The waterfront was itself, which is to say it was designed to look like a photograph of a waterfront. There were lights strung like a musical staff and people walking dogs that matched their coats. The pier was set with cocktail tables that had stretchy white fabric on them, like a wedding with good intentions. A banner hung that said, "Success Celebration in a sans serif," that probably had a brainstorm behind it. I didn't hate it. I hate things less when they are honest about their goals. A person with a clipboard smiled at me like a beam and asked if I was on the list. "I'm here to check sound levels and confirm that camera angles do not constitute an unreasonable monitoring of the public walkway," I said in the rhythm of someone who has made that sentence exist. I flashed the lanyard. It shone obligingly. Of course, she said, and she made a note that would later be typed into a system as sound okay, camera okay, man with badge walked around. She gave me a wristband that said access, as if it had the power to open a door. I walked. The sound engineer had a board with 12 sliders and the look of a man who had fallen in love with a wall. Derek was at the edge of a knot of people, his laugh a little siren. He wore teal joggers in a way that insisted on being seen even in the kind of crowd where men wear statement sneakers and call it charity. Lena was at the center of gravity, which is a trick she learned somewhere between high school and a job that made her a speaker at things where the chairs are white. She had her ring light smile on even without the ring light. She saw me and did not see me the way a stage light sees dust, present, but not in the foreground of the story. I kept moving. It helped that I had a reason to look up. The cameras on the pier were new enough to have paint smell. They watched the event the way birds watch a field. I found the supervisor for Harbor Secure, black polo, radio, a holster for a pen as if ink needed restraint, and introduced myself as the kind of person who writes things down and then people read them. Looking to make sure your enforcement policy isn't getting in the way of the public's right to a walkway, I said. He lowered his chin, which is a handshake for men who prefer their hands for other work. We don't block the path. We just make sure the donor cars don't get broken into. Tonight's expected volume, I said, pen poised over a blank that I intended never to fill. 50 to 60 vehicles in the minimum hour between 8 and 9, triple cycle on egress at 10:30. We do tow, but only if the condo requests. Do they request often? They've been strict again, he said. We had to pull 3 last weekend. People don't like rules at the water. Water is where the city pretends it's quiet, I said. He looked at me as if I'd confessed a small crime. You going to quote me on that? Only if it makes you sound nimble, I said. By 8, the light had gone from Instagram to noir. The speeches started. Derek looked the way men on magazine covers look when the article is about a failure they're proud of because it led to their real success. He thanked the board, the donors, the staff, the trainees, the police for their partnership, the community for their patience, the city for its grit, the river for flowing, himself for not giving up. It was a litany with a beat. Lena handled the transitions without being the show. That's a real skill. She moved from quote to quote with a metronome's patience, eyes on the clock, pulse steady even when a mic squealed. When the mayor's deputy, the understudy of authority, took the mic and said something about tax incentives like it was a bedtime story, I walked to the edge of the lot, where the cars lined up like little stories you could climb into. I watched the tow truck circle once like a shark that had been trained to wait for the host to ring a bell. The Harbor Secure supervisor got a ping on his radio and turned like a plant that hears rain. He gestured to the tow driver, and the tow driver raised 2 fingers, the universal sign for, "You got it." I walked further down where a sign said, "Visitors, please register," which is a politeness that doesn't survive appetites. Teal SUV arrived without fanfare at 9:12, Derek late, because narratives are allowed that luxury. He rolled into a visitor slot with the confidence of a man who thinks the law is a dog trained to bite other people. Lena slid in behind him in a rideshare and did that thing she does where she makes her mouth into a shape that says, "I am tired. Please appreciate me for working too hard." The camera near the stairwell alit them in cool white. I checked the screen on my phone, not my system, the condo's system, only in the public-facing status page that any resident can see if they know it exists. It showed occupancy, average duration, flags. At 9:17, a ticket opened on the management portal. Unregistered visitor vehicle. I watched gravity work. A Harbor Secure guard with a clipboard approached Derek's SUV. Derek performed a smile and a nod and a small, my bad hand gesture, as if apologizing for a rain shower he had personally ordered. The guard asked him to register. Derek waved, pulled out his phone, pretended to type. I could see the bluff from 20 feet. He was scrolling a social feed where he was the social. The guard waited 30 seconds. 60. He marked his clipboard with a pen that had run out of ink, which felt like a metaphor, and said something to the tow driver that made the tow driver's eyebrows do math. A woman stumbled nearby, laughing with a man, her heels making that sound like a small animal trying to get out of a trap, and time elongated the way it does when you can see 20 seconds into future events. It's a cheap magic trick and it runs on math. The tow driver pulled his truck into position, angled, reversed, and a hydraulic system sang itself awake. Derek came out then, holding a plate of little squares that were either brownies or good intentions, and saw his ride rise in an angle that promised doom. He put the plate on the hood and gestured as if delivering a TED Talk on the subject of, "Are you out of your mind?" "Strict mode," the guard said, not unkind. "I'm the host," Derek said, unwrapping his major chord stare. "Do you know who?" "Visitors register," the guard said. "No exceptions. You can pay at release, or you can register next time." "Next time," Derek said as if it were a slur. He pulled out a billfold, an actual fold, not a card, and fanned it like a shade. The tow driver looked at the guard looked at the tow driver, and my ankle hurt in a specific place. It hurts when someone tries to make air into money. The guard shook his head. The tow driver switched gears. The teal SUV did a little jump, and then the chain pulled it the way a moral of a story pulls a sentence. Lena stood 10 feet behind Derek with her shoulders set. Her face had that ring light arrangement it gets when she tries not to look like she's looking at herself seeing something. Her eyes slid to me and away, fast as a streetlight changing. There was a small crowd because crowds grow wherever noise grows. Some had a look I recognized from our block when a neighbor returns a borrowed drill. Civic alertness. Some had the eye shine of people living in a digital future where every misfortune should be monetized as content. Cell phones angled up. A woman with a chunky camera stepped forward, her badge on a lanyard that said, "Influence." The Harbor Secure supervisor stepped back, a professional seam in the picture. The tow truck pulled toward the curb with a shrugging hydraulic cough. Derek pivoted. If he'd been a dancer, it would have been a clean half-turn. He aimed the smile at the crowd like a weapon designed to be non-lethal. "You know what?" he said, into the public microphone of event attention. "It's okay. Rules are rules." There it was, the gym teacher pity voice. He turned to the guard, closed the angle. "Listen, why don't you swing by the desk and we'll smooth this out? I'm sure there's been a misunderstanding." "We can release the vehicle," the supervisor said, reading from his policy brain. "After you pay the on-site fee. It's $200 with strict mode active." $200, Derek said, savoring indignation like a steak. "That's dinner for 4. You're telling me a misunderstanding costs more than a donation?" "A donation isn't payment for a rule," the supervisor said, and I liked him then, the way you like a cashier who says, "Next," in a tone that respects chronology. Lena moved close enough to hear. She had her run-of-show headset slung around her neck like a necklace suddenly too heavy. "We can cover it," she said quietly to Derek, like she was telling him your fly is down without using the words. "We're not covering a shakedown," Derek said louder so the people with phones didn't have to strain. "It's extortion. On a night we are raising money for under-resourced neighborhoods. This is what the city does." "It's what the condo does," I said, a little louder than my usual, because I wanted my voice to be a flat stone skipping across this particular pond. "You parked in a lot you don't live in without registering. Success doesn't invalidate a sign." "Who are you?" Derek asked, his eyes narrowing the way they do when he's looking for a camera to deliver to. "A resident," I said. "We live here. We pay for the visitor slots so our cousins can come at Thanksgiving without playing musical chairs with the curb." "He's Evan," Lena said to Derek after a beat, like my name had fallen behind the couch. "He's—" "I know who he is," Derek said, though he didn't. He knew version of person, a man at an event with a cheap lanyard, an audience member who had crossed the invisible line. He smiled at me, as if I had asked for a refund on common sense. "Buddy, we're on the same team." "Which team is that?" I said. "The one that reads signs or the one that doesn't?" He lifted the plate of brownies like an offering. "Have something sweet. It'll improve your mood." "No thanks," I said. "Sugar makes me honest." The tow truck driver, allergic to dialogue, tightened a chain. The teal SUV made a little squeal the way rich things do when you ask them to perform manual labor. Derek did a quick calculus. If he made a scene, it would live on in 1,000 little rectangles. If he paid, people would attend to the transaction, which is not a story. If he smiled and made a joke, he could shepherd the moment into a future where he had been magnanimous. He went with the joke. "I guess the community gives and the community takes," he said into a phone someone had helpfully pointed at him. "Make sure to register your cars, folks, even if you're trying to do something good. The rules are so strict around here, my joggers are about to get a ticket." He laughed a tick louder than the joke deserved. There were smiles. No one clapped, because even the performative have limits. He handed his card to the supervisor with a little flourish that said he had learned a sleight of hand or two at a boyhood magic camp. "Bill me," he said. "Payment on release," the supervisor said, as if quoting a scripture. "It's not personal. It's not discretionary." Later, I would admit to myself that if he'd paid right then, smile tight, done, I would still have felt clean. Gravity had worked, but he didn't. He let the truck pull away with his teal glowing like a sad fish under the pier light, and then he turned back to the gala and raised his hands like a conductor with a point to make. The cameras moved like flowers turning to sun. The event shook itself like a dog out of water, and the schedule returned. People went back to drinks and small permissions and larger denials. The thing about spectacle is, it always gets folded into the next. Lena went intense, toggling logistic things on the fly, her headset back on, her spine a list of bullet points. I watched her for the grim pleasure of watching someone good at her job be good at it. It's a terrible drug, competence, when you have it and when you watch it in someone who stopped wanting you to notice. At 10:30, the music pivoted to people who have paid a DJ to sound like a Spotify algorithm. The speeches wound down to notes of, "Go out into the night and be as generous as you are in this small space," which is code for, "Don't get arrested on your way to your car." The crowd turned in a big tide-like way and began to spill across the plaza toward the garage and the street. I broke off toward the garage proper, a separate structure from the pier but attached by a walkway, the color of tired metal. The Harbor Secure supervisor gave me a nod without interest. A couple argued in undertones about an Uber that had canceled, and whether that was fate, telling them they're meant to walk to the train because walking together is romantic, as long as you both want to. I put a hand to the cool of the concrete pillar because surfaces matter. The tow truck was back, its bed empty and gleaming. The driver hummed a tune I recognized from a foam cup coffee commercial. Cheerful, efficient. Derek came down the stairs with an entourage of 2 men who wore their shirts like they cost more than their ex-girlfriend's therapists, and Lena, whose shoes had a click that said she was tired of being taller. Derek had a new plan, you could see it. He'd decided to make a comic bit of the tow. He'd found the humor in his misfortune in the way a drowning man finds a log that turns out to be a crocodile. He grinned at the gathered watchers. Smaller crowd now, but still enough for social reinforcement. "It's like the city wants to keep me humble," he announced. "I guess I'm taking a lift with my community. Anyone else stranded tonight?" He lifted his arms to suggest hugs, solidarity. It would have worked. It works so often. But the teal SUV was back, still hooked to the tow, the driver waiting to release after the fee, and when Derek reached for his wallet and realized he had a plate where a pocket should be, a casualty of the brownie joke, he stalled. He looked to Lena, and there it was, the thing I'd come for without admitting it, that flicker in her face like the curtain moved by a draft. She saw her face seeing Derek. She saw the shape of a man who always performed and then sent the bill to the room. "I'll get it," she started, reflex a muscle that had grown strong. "No," Derek said quick. "No, it's—" He looked at the Harbor Secure supervisor. "Do you take cards?" "Card readers down," the supervisor said, sympathetic but made of granite. "ATM in the lobby." Derek's friends performed the theater of checking their pockets and their phones and finding themselves just cashless enough to be modern. "Do you take Venmo?" one asked to the tow truck. The tow truck did not take Venmo. I did not step forward because I didn't want to be in the scene anymore. I had introduced gravity. It was on its own. Lena went to the ATM, took out bills in 20s because the machine has a sense of humor, and counted under a light that made her skin look like the skin of a person who makes it glow for a living. She handed the money to the Harbor Secure supervisor, who hand-wrote a receipt in carbon duplicate like it was 1987. Derek performed gratitude. "You're a lifesaver," he said. "I owe you." "You do," Lena said. Something in her voice had a new angle, not a threat, an inventory. He missed it because he was already turning back toward the event's aftertaste. The tow dropped the SUV, the chain unhinged, gravity released its claim. Everything that had happened would now be a joke, an anecdote. The room would retell it as proof of authenticity. Success doesn't exempt you from rules. See how well we handle inconvenience, how normal we are, how we are citizens under law. People need their saints to get parking tickets. I watched the narrative build itself like scaffolding around a statue. I watched my role get painted out. That's good. The men with the money liked the story better that way. When we were back in the living room, after the lights and the river and the speeches and the tow and the receipt, Lena put her bag down too carefully again. She looked like someone's story had been read to her out of order, and she was rearranging the pages in her mind. "That was you," she said, not a question. "You mean gravity?" I said. "You toggled it." "I set it to on," I said. "It tends to work better than off." "You could have embarrassed me," she said, which was not the sentence I expected. Not, "You embarrassed him," not, "You're petty." She had seen the camera and the crowd and me standing with a pen like a consequence, and she had done the math. "I didn't," I said. "He did. He wanted the story to be about how rules are for other people until the optics are bad." "Optics," she muttered, as if I'd used her word against her. "You think this will make him—" "I think," I said, "that a man who solves his inconveniences with charisma is a man who loses when the machine requires currency. It's good for you. You'll see him without the blue light. You'll see the hummed note underneath the ad." She looked at me with the expression you give a magician after you find the second coin behind your ear and you're already bored with it. "I always saw him," she said. "You think I'm a teenager. You think I don't know what charisma is. What I liked was that he could put bodies in a room. That's my job. Bodies in a room. You don't get to stand outside and wrap yourself in integrity because you don't like rooms. You don't get to call yourself gravity like you're not just—" She exhaled. The exhale had the shape of a spinnaker losing wind. "Forget it. I'm tired." "You called me dramatic," I said, "because there are parts of me still 17, showing off a new scar." "Because you are," she said. "You wrapped a toe in morality. You made a performance of decency, because you have the shame of not having it when it mattered." "Ah," I said. "Now we're coming to the good part." She rubbed her temple in a circle like she was waxing the memory of us. "You didn't fight for us, Evan. Not when it got quiet. Not when it got boring. You retreated into your patterns and your cameras and the comfort of the late shift, and I—" She stopped. The silence rolled between us like a bottle. "It doesn't matter." "It matters," I said, which is what men say when they want to change the subject to something they can lift. "But we can, later. Right now, I want you to know that if you bring your teal jogger man back into this building, He'll meet gravity every time. Not because you're with him. Because rules don't want to be actors in his play. I'm not bringing him here, she said, and for once I believed her without wanting to. I'm not. It's not that. Then what is it? I said, letting the question sit like a tool on the table. Not beating her with it, placing it. You and I stopped being in the same room a long time ago, she said. I tried to tell myself a story about why. Sometimes it had you as the hero. Sometimes it had me as the villain. Sometimes it was just weather. I'm tired of stories. I'm tired of segregation into narratives that make us sound brave for quitting. Maybe I wanted an audience for being cruel. Maybe I wanted to practice ending things on a stage. Maybe I liked rehearsals better than the show. Community, I said. The word didn't rot this time, it just sat. She nodded. We're good at building it out there. We're terrible at it here. We slept in our own rooms that night like a kind of ceasefire. In the morning, I woke to rain with ambition. It battered the window in sheets, a copier jamming, then unsticking, then jamming. Rain has a way of making private dramas feel small and universal simultaneously. Everyone is wet, and your heart is still your heart. My phone vibrated with a notification from the condo portal. Thanks for your report. Action taken. I swiped it away without reading the comments because comments are an admission that the audience matters more than the stage. Saturday, I did the useful things I can do when I'm not being valuable. Laundry, a fix to the light switch in the hall that had developed a ghost, the resistor on a little board that keeps the stairwell exit sign from flickering like a haunted theater. I like fixing small things as a way to apologize to the concept of repair for the irreparable parts of my life. The building let me. One of the kids in 3A let me in to look at their Wi-Fi because it wouldn't reach the back room where the PlayStation lives, and he watched me like I'd brought a wand. I added an extender he'd bought from a brand that thinks fonts are hardware. He high-fived me with a hand sticky with fruit roll-up red. You code? He asked. I make passwords better, I said. Do you? He said. Aren't all passwords just like letters? They're a song you have to remember, I said, and you don't want it to be the one everyone hums. Back in my living room, Lena left a row of things on the couch like a shoreline. A blazer, a leather notebook, a correction tape roller, a little clear bag with hair ties. Her phone lay like a patient. She was in the bathroom with the hairdryer blasting a sound that made my teeth ache. On the phone's lock screen, notifications piled like driftwood. 1 BB popped up again, just the initials, shy and lowercase, sliding up the glass like a fish. I did not touch it. I do not read mail that isn't mine, even when it's walking into my eyes. There are rules. The rules have to be there before the narrative if you want to look at yourself in the morning and not see the lens. I went for a walk. The rain had decided to test its range. Under my hood, the world looked like a documentary about the sea in which humans are a migratory species that wore the wrong shoes. At the corner, I found Mrs. Palomo in her housecoat, and a big translucent poncho like a jellyfish had decided to offer her shelter. She waved me over as if the rain were a performance she'd paid for and I ought to appreciate. You see, she said, weather always comes on the weekend. It's a sin. How's your field of view in this? I asked. She lifted her binoculars, old, heavy, black like guilt, and frowned. Fog makes the handsome next door look honest, she said. I don't like it. You see the teal joggers? I said. Does he own a raincoat? She sniffed. Gym men think they're waterproof. He came last night like always, left smelling like cinnamon. He parked wrong again, but they took the car. It was beautiful justice. He is not used to being corrected. She likes justice like church ladies like cake. I leaned on the wall by her stoop and let her report. Neighbors can make a neighborhood into a newsroom if you let them. And Lena? She asked, the way older women ask about young marriages like they're keeping a ledger of all the reasons people shouldn't get their hopes up. She's doing a show, I said, which is true most days. Shows end, she said. What trick comes after a curtain? Lights up, I said. She pursed her lips and looked up at the sky. Everyone thinks lights up means morning, but sometimes you're just in a different scene. Don't get confused. I nodded and walked on. The rain let up, as if it had spent itself on the city already, and the air felt like a new body under an old shirt. At 3, Maya called. Unusual for a Saturday because Saturday is when she goes to her sister's apartment and lets a niece braid her hair into plaits that look like a nested algorithm. You alive? She asked. I'm rehearsing for it, I said. I had a thought, she said. You know how you like cameras. I know cameras, I corrected. There's a difference, she said. Our guy at the waterfront? He had someone recorded last month paying a kid in cash to do what looked like a minor graffiti cleanup on a wall that didn't belong to him. That's the opposite of graffiti, I said. Yeah, but it's also illegal if it's property not assigned to your event. Public nuisance, interfering with municipal signage. Correct me if I'm wrong, I said. This is nothing. Usually, she said. Unless the person in cash is your friend Derek, and the kid is also being told to take down posters for a tenant union meeting in the same area. Now that's a song I can hum, I said. Where do you know this from? I know a guy who knows a guy whose niece is dating a kid with a scooter, she said, which is how the city works. Point is, there's a video, and there's a small group of tenants who would like nothing better than to make it very public that the gym charity that loves community is also the gym charity that removes flyers that talk about rent strikes. They want an audience, but they don't know where to find a stage. And you called me, I said, moved in a way I wouldn't put words on. I called you because you like stagecraft and also because you're stupid enough to look at your own life and think you can fix other people's, she said, generous in her way. You want the file? I don't want to be a crime, I said, which I meant in the moral sense and the practical one. You won't be, she said. Source is clean on this. Also, you're not going to do anything stupid with it. You're going to hold it and think about whether gravity needs a soundtrack. Send it, I said. She sent it. I watched it twice. In it, Derek wore a baseball cap like a disguise that makes you look more like yourself. He handed cash to a kid with a pencil mustache and pointed at a wall where a flyer said, in that kind of type that's been photocopied 400 times, Tenants Meeting Thursday. The kid peeled the tape, balled up paper like it had insulted him. Derek laughed at something someone not in frame said. The camera shook slightly as if its holder had wanted to say, hey, but remembered he didn't like confrontation. Lena came out of the bedroom while the video looped. Hair wet, face clean, the world briefly a place without brands. She saw the screen and stopped. What is that? She said, not a theatrical question. A proof of concept, I said, because the truth is sometimes less helpful than a term. Turn it off, she said, a little too fast. I can, I said. But I should also show you the stills I once had of you sitting in his car. So you're doing mutual assured humiliation now, she said without heat. Great. I'm not going to show it to anyone, I said, which was true. I just want you to see the halo without the ring light. She took the remote and turned the TV off with the decisive click of someone who solved a problem because it was too bright. You think this is about him? I think it's partly about me, I said. I'm not performing innocence. I'm just telling you the instruments I'm holding. You've always needed to avenge yourself against something, she said. Against your father who left, against the editor who forgot your name in that meeting, against the time the taxi didn't stop for you because the guy behind you wore a better coat. You're doing it now because you can't admit you still love me the way a night desk loves a sunrise. Begrudgingly, after the exhaustion, because it means a shift is over and you get to pretend you did your part. The words landed in that soft place under my ribs where truth goes to sleep when it can't face itself. I sat down in the chair with a sag, my old handshake, and looked at Lena the way you look at a city you know. Not unkindly, not naively, knowing the shortcuts and the ghosts. "I do still love you," I said. It made a sound in the room like a door someone had meant to oil. "And I hate you for being better at leaving. And I hate myself for wanting to be cruel to you because it would be easier to explain suffering if I could rebrand it as justice. I'm trying not to." She sat across from me and looked like a person on a subway car who has to stand but is too polite to ask the man sitting with his bag on the seat to move it. "I don't know what we are," she said. "I do know that if you push this video out in some way that hurts people who are trying to organize for rent, you'll be someone I don't recognize. If you push it in a way that hurts only him, you'll be someone I don't recognize too. Because you'll have acted to hurt one person instead of to help a thing that matters. Can you tell me you know the difference?" "I can tell you I'm learning it," I said. She nodded. "Learning counts, but learning hurts other people if you practice on them." She stood up and went to the window and looked at nothing. "I have a line at the bottom of my deck that says, 'We do not undermine other communities to elevate our own.' I fought for that line in a meeting where a guy said it sounded moralistic, and I said, 'Good, it should.' If Derek—" She stopped, pressed her thumb and forefinger into the corners of her eyes like she wanted to erase the night. "If he did that, he becomes work I'm not willing to do anymore." "You don't have to announce that on a pier," I said. "I know," she said. "I can do it by not answering his texts. I can do it by leaving my ring light off when he calls." Sunday, we re-entered our routines, like a river re-enters a bank after it floods. I went to the ledger even though I wasn't on shift because the printer had spit a warning on Friday about a belt, and if the belt broke on a Monday, the paper would limp. The press manager looked at me with that appreciation reserved for people who come in when they don't have to, a species rarer than donors. I cleaned rollers. Machines have hearts. People's hearts have machines. You can maintain both with oil if you know the right weight. I thought about Derek and his charisma and my gravity and the kids who need one more place to drink clean water. I thought about civic theater and the actual city and about the difference between stage prop and infrastructure. If you peel a sticker off a public sign, what's left is glue and the faint outline of a thing that used to be allowed. If you peel charisma off a man, what's left is the need that got him there in the first place. It can be a good need. It often starts that way. It wants to be useful. It drifts, like a boat not anchored right. I texted Maya, "The vid. Who are the tenants?" She sent names and a place and a time. A church basement that I knew from a different year when a different fight had a different flyer. Monday night. I applied my night shift logic. Show up late enough to let them be themselves, early enough to earn a chair. Monday came with sun as if the weekend had been a test the sky had passed. Lena left that morning with a bag that had less stuff in it and a set to her shoulders that said she had taken the ring light down from the shelf inside and looked at it. I wanted to ask where she was staying when she didn't want to stay here. I didn't. We were not trusting each other not to use information as a weapon yet. The church basement smelled like coffee that had been brewed using a sock and hope. Folding chairs arranged themselves as if for a group therapy session in a movie. A banner on the far wall said, "Community," in letters hand-painted by someone with optimism and no level. The same word as before, here with less money and more chairs. People arrived in ones and twos, the way movements do, on public transit, with tote bags, with kids they couldn't leave at home. The kid with the pencil mustache from the video came in and sat on the edge of a chair like the chair might reject him. A woman with a voice like a school bell called the meeting to order. She wore a sweatshirt that said, "Our buildings, our rules." She talked about rent increase notices. She talked about the landlord who left the heat off for 3 days and said it was because the underground fuel delivery line was frozen, which it wasn't. She talked about the flyers and how someone had seen someone peel them. She held up a phone and the video played on speaker, small and tinny and essential. No one cheered. It wasn't that kind of meeting. A man with a cap that said Navy shook his head. A kid in a plaid shirt looked like he'd been told adults were not to be believed anymore. "We don't name," the woman said, "because naming becomes their story. We tell what happened. We show it. We talk about strategy." She wrote in block letters on a whiteboard that had seen better markers: flyer stations, permissions, public posting spaces, legal. She divided us into groups like a teacher. I ended up with the kid with the pencil mustache and a woman who managed the night crew at a hospital, which meant she could organize a nation while making sure sheets were tucked tight enough to keep our sorrow from chilling. We talked about permission. We talked about public property. We talked about how to train volunteers to say no thank you to men with baseball caps and nice teeth. The kid looked at me and said, "You're a cop?" Which is a fair question in any city basement. "I'm a guy who likes doors working right," I said. "Okay," he said, testing the weight of the sentence. I told them about public vantage, about the importance of not blocking, about how to hold a phone with both hands and in landscape because evidence likes a bigger future. I did not tell them about Derek. They already had him in his correct category. A type. Types are what hurt movements. They breed good enemies and lazy friends. I needed them to know tools, not villains. Villains come preloaded. When the meeting broke, the woman with the school bell voice came up to me and shook my hand so vigorously it felt like we were trying to pull each other across a small river. "You a reporter?" she asked. "I sleep there," I said. "We need you," she said. "We need someone who will tell the story without putting a selfie in the lead." "I'm off the selfie beat," I said, "but I can help with your newsletter software so you don't get locked out." "We have a nephew," she said. "We always have a nephew." "Then I can bring coffee," I said, "and I can listen." She smiled in the way people do when they realize you're useful, but not hero material, relief. It's an underrated expression. I like making it happen. When I got home after, Lena was at the table with a stack of papers that looked suspiciously like lease agreements and a rental listing for a one-bedroom near the park. My stomach did its insistence thing, and then, because it's faithful, went back to doing whatever stomachs do when people are writing their futures. "You moving?" I asked. "Exploring," she said. "I looked at 2 today. One was a closet that had delusions of living room. One had a neighbor who plays the trumpet like he invented air. I liked the light in the second one. The landlord liked me until she realized I wasn't married. Then she liked me more because she doesn't have to deal with a couple." "You'll have to deal with a trumpet," I said. She shrugged, the kind of shrug that means she has already auditioned every version of the argument in her head and chosen the one she can live with. She always did things that way, quietly, but not without thought. She turned a page and pointed to the section where the rent amount lived, a number that made my spine go slightly concave. "It's not that bad," she said, reading my face. "It's an amount," I said. "Amounts do things to people." "Everything does things to people," she said. "We just pretend money is the only culprit because it's easy to count." She wasn't wrong. Lena rarely was. She handled truth the same way she handled glassware, with both hands, steady, without performing the act of caring. She didn't need to. The care was obvious. "You thinking of leaving because of me?" I asked, and immediately regretted the shape of the question. It sounded like an accusation dressed as vulnerability. She didn't look up right away. She let the silence do a lap around the room first, see if it came back calmer. "Partly," she said, "but not in the way you think. Not to get away. More like to let things breathe. It's hard to know what you want when the walls remember every version of you." That landed somewhere behind my ribs, as most of her sentences did. "I didn't know the walls were keeping score," I said. "They're polite about it," she said. "But they don't forget." She gathered the papers into a neat stack, squared the edges like she was tucking a feeling in for the night. "Do you want me to stay?" she asked, and this time it was her voice that held the accusation disguised as vulnerability. "I want the option of you staying," I said. Wanting the outcome feels like cheating. She smiled, not happy, but amused at how predictable I had become. You're good at doors, she said, but not all of them are made of hinges. I wanted to tell her I knew that I understood metaphor when it wasn't bent beyond recognition, but understanding a thing isn't the same as fixing it. And I fix things. That's my failing. She looked past me, at the window, at the slice of night that lived there. If I go, she said, I still want to have dinner once a week. I don't want us to default into forgetting. If you go, I said, I'll still keep a chair open. Chairs don't get lonely, she said. People do. Another hit to the ribs, clean, precise. She could have been a surgeon if feelings were organs. I walked to the counter and filled the kettle, not because we needed tea, but because sound sometimes makes choices less sharp. The water ran, the air filled with the honest noise of plumbing, and I let the moment be unspectacular. Not all heartbreaks need thunder. Some just need acknowledgement. Trumpet guy might get good, I said over my shoulder. Or I might, she said. The kettle came to a boil. She gathered her papers. We were two people in a kitchen, both pretending water was the thing we were waiting to change. I poured. She stayed seated. The tea steeped. Neither of us did. There's a march next week, I said. The people from the basement meeting, they need bodies, not warm ones, present ones. She nodded. You going? Yeah. Good, she said. You need something to belong to that doesn't ask for an ending. Everything ends, I said. Maybe, but not everything needs a funeral. We drank our tea. The trumpet somewhere in the world practiced a note nobody asked for. The city kept breathing, machinery and hope and exhaustion, all trying to share the same lungs. The stack of paperwork remained between us like a polite guest waiting to be excused. The next morning, the world continued not caring about our tea, our walls, or our possible futures. That's the useful thing about mornings. They arrive without checking who they're interrupting. I stepped outside, the street still slick from a night rain, and felt the way the city resets itself, never fully clean, just rearranged enough to pretend. At the cafe on the corner, the barista with the constellation tattoo on her wrist slid me a drink before I spoke. You look like you slept in negotiations, she said. I lost, I said. Then you can still win something else, she shrugged. I liked people who treated advice like lint, offer it, swipe, move on. At the bulletin board by the window, someone had stapled a flyer. Know your rights. No one gets left alone. Training session Thursday. The same handwriting as the basement whiteboard. I almost smiled. Movements travel like rumors in subway air. I took a photo. Landscape, both hands. Evidence likes a bigger future. That night, Lena wasn't home. Not a surprise. She had mentioned a late shift helping her cousin with a gallery opening. I used the time the way people do when they don't know if they're waiting or just awake. Organizing drawers, wiping things that weren't dirty, opening the fridge like it might offer clarity in Tupperware form. Her half of the closet was still full. That meant nothing. Packing is an act of certainty. Browsing apartments is an act of rehearsal. I sat at the table where her papers had been. The indent of the stack was still faintly visible in the wood grain, like the echo of a decision. My phone buzzed. A message from the kid with the pencil mustache. You said you'd send the doc about public vantage. We need it. PPL already arguing rules. PPL love rules when they don't have power. He wasn't wrong. I typed back, you'll have it tonight. Don't let it turn into a debate club. He sent back, too late. Movements always trip first on certainty. No one is more sure than the wrong person early. I opened my laptop, wrote the basics, filming angles, police distance laws, what to say, what not to say, when to shut up, when to speak loudly enough that the camera doesn't need subtitles. I added a line at the top, this is strategy, not theology. No one has to agree. Everyone has to survive. When I finished, the cursor blinked like it was asking if I wanted to add anything about hope. I didn't. Hope is optional. Preparation isn't. I hit send. The kid replied with a thumbs-up emoji. Even revolutions speak fluent shorthand. Midnight. Key in the door. Lena came in smelling like paint. Conversation. Someone else's idea of art. How was it? I asked. Too many people trying to redefine red, she said. But the hummus was free. She dropped her bag, kicked off her shoes, looked at me in that way that measured the room's emotional temperature without a thermometer. You okay? She asked. I wrote a document that might save a stranger's teeth. Productive, she said. She sat across from me. Not the usual beside me seat. Across is a geography. You and I, she said. We're good at parallel. Not so good at merge. Highways are dangerous, I said. So are cul-de-sacs. I wanted to argue, but she had already turned the sentence into a furnished room. All I could do was stand in the doorway and acknowledge the layout. I'm not leaving to leave you, she said. I'm leaving to not calcify. Can we uncalcify together? I asked. Maybe. But I don't want the experiment to be our only story. She reached across the table, touched the back of my hand, a gesture halfway between comfort and farewell. I'll still have keys, she said. Keys don't mean entry, I said. They mean possibility. She stood, stretched, yawned the kind of yawn that exposes childhood, then walked to her room. Our room, the room she might be measuring for absence. The door clicked shut, not loudly, just real. Time doesn't jump, it inches. The week moved in inches. Flyers got printed. Volunteers got labeled volunteers. The kid with the pencil mustache shaved it clean, said he wanted to be taken seriously. The hospital night shift woman built a spreadsheet that looked like a flight plan. People rehearsed how not to panic on camera. No one rehearsed what comes after. Lena looked at two more places. One had a window that pretended to be a view. One had no windows at all, which she said was honest in its own way. We cooked dinner twice, ate together once, shared silence 3 times. Silence is its own arithmetic. The march came. Bodies showed up. Signs, chants, police lines. The choreography of dissent. I filmed. Landscape, both hands. Evidence likes a bigger future. A man in a baseball cap tried to argue that blocking a sidewalk equals losing the moral high ground. The kid, now mustacheless, said, "Sir, the moral high ground is closed for renovations." The man blinked, retreated. Small victories are still victories. When it was over, the group dispersed into exhausted particles. I walked home with a cup of coffee I didn't want, but held like it meant something. Lena was packing. Not everything, but enough to recognize motion. She looked up, didn't pause, didn't defend. I found one, she said. The trumpet guy moved out. The new neighbor does yoga at confusing hours but wears headphones. Congratulations, I said, and meant it and didn't. She folded a sweater. You can still visit, but don't bring advice. Just bring oranges or something. Why oranges? Their work to open makes people slow down. I nodded, tried to memorize the fold of her hair, the angle of her intent, the way resolve looked when worn by someone gentle. You'll text when you land? I said. I'm not flying, she smiled, just relocating the air around me. The box in her hands wasn't heavy. That almost hurt more. I walked her to the door. Not dramatic, not tragic. 2 people who had run out of synonyms for staying. She looked at me, same way she did the first time we met. Me holding a broken door hinge, her holding a grocery bag, both of us trying to look like we knew what we were doing. You're still you, she said. Just don't forget to let other people be them. That sound like wisdom from a fortune cookie, I said. Then break it open, she said, and left. The door closed. Worked perfectly. I had fixed it last month. Later at the table, I watched the grain of the wood again. The faint indent of old papers had faded. The table didn't remember her decisions anymore. Only I did. My phone buzzed. Message from the hospital woman. The newsletter works now. Nephew gave up. Thanks. Another. Kid with no mustache. Your doc saved 2 ppl from getting cuffed. Also, someone still held phone vertical. Progress is slow. Another. Woman with the school bell voice. We need a title for the story. Something true and not cute. I typed, how about, we're still here. She wrote back, that's not a title. That's a promise. I leaned back, looked at the door, still closed, still working right. Some days, that's what passes for grace. I wrote back, promises are a kind of title. She sent a single word, print. And for the first time in days, the room didn't feel like it was shrinking to fit a missing person. It felt like a pause. Not an ending. Not yet. I stayed at the table a long time. Long enough to notice the quiet wasn't accusatory anymore. Long enough to remember that stillness isn't the same as emptiness. Long enough to believe that maybe tomorrow could be something other than a ledger of what used to be. Outside, someone practiced trumpet. Badly. I almost laughed. Evidence likes a bigger future. Maybe people do too.